to see it. Thanks so much for joining us. Interesting that the president showed some humility last night in terms of saying that was one of his few regrets. But who do you blame for the rancor right now? I mean, with all of the executive action and the finger pointing of everybody else's fault, it's his fault, no?
Yeah, I too enjoyed that moment of humility. I thought that was a nice touch for him. Yeah, it seems you just can't compare Obama to Kennedy, who, when he came to power, began to reach out to the middle. He did even before he came to power, even in the campaign. And the same with Bill Clinton, who, through triangulation and worked with the opposition. For Barack Obama, he just couldn't resist. This was his last chance to be the father of the nation, of all the people, saying, you may not like me, I like you, and I've given my life to keeping you safe and prosperous. He couldn't do it. Unity seems, his definition of unity is submission. That's the message that I took from it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Dagan, what did you think of the speech?
I thought it would be better delivered from Fantasyland at Disney World than from where it was last night. That there was just a disconnect. I think that with the reality on the ground, you got 10 sailors at the time who were being held by Iran, terror attacks around the world, Syria in collapse, the Middle East a disaster, and one of his closing lines was, "I'm optimistic that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word."
Yeah.
And I just thought that it's one thing to be optimistic, but it's also another thing to be in denial, and I'd say that was denial over optimism.
Anthony, the world is falling apart. I mean, look at the Middle East, getting worse. And then there's the economic part of the story. Worst beginning to any year ever for markets, you know, so well, no mention.
I mean, listen, he said he had a few regrets. I could list a laundry list of regrets that he probably really should have. But I'll tell you one thing, Maria, he is a phenomenal public speaker.
Absolutely.
And the reason why he became president was, at the start, was that speech he made at the Democratic Convention in 2004. And so he's a phenomenal public speaker. He has captured the imagination of 51 or 53% of the people in the last 8 years. And so if the Republicans want to win the presidency, they need to learn from that, and they need to figure out a more unifying message for the American people.
And you wrote a great piece this morning on FoxBusiness.com.
It's going to be published at 7 a.m.
Okay, good.
Just talking about the possible bankruptcy and restructuring of the Republican Party. I really feel that no matter which candidate gets this, if it's an establishmentarian or it's someone from the outside, it's going to cause a schism in this great party, and it's going to force this party to restructure a lot of the ways it does things.
Yeah,
we need more togetherness in the Republican Party if we want to go forward.
Check out our new site, FoxBusiness.com, new and improved site. Doug, what's your take? What are your takeaways from the State of the Union last night, and what do you think the Republican contenders need to do on the heels of what Anthony's writing about this morning?
Well, I think the speech fell apart when he got into foreign policy. I just flew in from Moscow last night, and some of my Russian friends were pointing out to me, they said, you know, all through history you'll see heads of state attacking the governments of other people, saying we don't have anything against the Russian people, but your leaders. But in this case, Obama has estranged entire races of people and nations. He attacked the Russian people, said you're a regional power, and the next day Russia had to ferry an American astronaut back to Earth because we don't have that capability. I think the speech fell apart when he got into foreign policy and was kind of trying to force a round peg into a square hole. At one point he even said, which was unforgettable to me, that these terrorist acts don't damage America. They're going to hurt America, and maybe technically that's true. But even the killing of an unarmed black man by a white police officer, that won't undo America. But that's terrible. And the killing of innocent people on American soil by terrorists is terrible. And he's our president. And so I think it fell apart when he got into foreign policy.
Yeah, in fact, he called it hot air.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Doug. I want to know from Doug, who does the president compare to then, in your mind? If not Kennedy, then who is he going to be who is he going to be remembered as being like?
Well, I think he's going to be remembered for being elected and Osama bin Laden. I think the long view of history will be unforgettable. Here is a man who was elected President of the United States, who was African American, in a country with the words, all men are created equal, written by men who owned slaves. That will be the dominating theme of his presidency, his election, not what actually happened on his watch, except the Osama bin Laden. And you have to admit that was one of his great lines that came out. He overdid it a little bit. I like the way he's understated, but he said, let them ask Osama bin Laden. I thought that was a great moment for him.
Yeah, it sure was. Doug, thank you. Doug Wead weighing in there.